everyone, and welcome to today's Wellness Watch session. Today's session comes from Season 1 of Wellness Watch. It was originally recorded on Learn It Live, our live learning platform. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and please also subscribe to our channel for more herbal medicine, health, and wellness related content. I hope you enjoy today's session as we talk about something sweet. Okay, good morning, and everyone. Welcome to Wellness Watch with the Dancing Herbalist. I'm Jillian Carnrick, and we also have Annabelle Shiver here today.
Good morning.
So for those of you who are new to Wellness Watch, my name again is Jillian Carnrick. I run the Dancing Herbalist. I have a Master of Science degree in herbal medicine. I am also a nutritionist and personal trainer. My personal focus when it comes to herbal medicine is on using herbs to support a variety of different wellness practices, as well as making herbal products for joint and muscle pain, and also skin sensitivities, injuries. Again, though, my focus really is a lot on wellness, so I have published the book, A Beginner's Guide to Wellness, if you're looking for some additional support for yourself through your own personal exploration. Annabelle?
Oh, hi. Yeah. So I don't really, you usually introduce me, but my name's Annabelle, and I'm the author of the Conscious Canary blog. I am a pharmaceutical injury survivor, an avid plant-based food explorer, also a raw food explorer, and a home herbalist and health advocate, and I do a lot of advocating for people on the spectrum, and am a high-functioning autist myself.
So this week we're going to be talking about something sweet, but before we get to that, we do have a variety of other free offerings I want to let you guys know about. Through the Dancing Herbalist, we do send out a newsletter once a month with different information on our classes, programs, herbal products, as well as free information on herbal medicine and wellness. You can sign up for that newsletter at thedancingherbalist.com. While you're there, you can also shop our different herbal products and wellness books. And if you made it to this class today, great. It means you are already on Learn It Live, and we have a variety of different classes on here. Some are free, some are paid, so you can browse through and find which ones work best for you. Different classes on herbal medicine, materia medica, nutrition, physiology, plant identification, and a whole bunch of different things so you can explore. And if you do have any questions after our sessions, the best way to be in touch with us is to head to our Facebook group. Both Annabelle and myself are in our Facebook group. The Facebook group is the Dancing Herbalists Herbies. You can find that through following the link on your screen, or you can just search that in the search bar on Facebook, which I think is a little bit easier than the really weird number web address that's on here. But like I said, today we're going to be focusing on something sweet. We do have our schedule for May up, so I wanted to touch on that real quick for you guys so you can see what we've got coming next month. We are going to be focusing our first week in May on breathing techniques. This is a great practice towards stress reduction, so if that's something you are looking for support in, starting with breathing is really the way to go, and breathing really affects a lot of different areas of our health that we might not think about. We're then also going to be covering meditation practices, another helpful thing for stress support. And there's a lot of different kinds of meditation practices out there, so we're going to talk about a few of them, but we definitely won't cover all of them. We'll then be looking at mindful eating, which if you're not really aware what that is, I usually call it conscious eating, but there's a few different terms for that. It's basically just paying attention and deciding what's going to work best for your food or not. And sometimes it's really easy to forget to think about the food we're eating and if we actually want to eat it or not. And to follow that up, we're then going to be talking about fasting and a lot of different kinds of fasting out there. We're not going to really talk about the pluses and minuses of each one, just kind of talk about like why one might choose one over another. And you can also see here our sessions that we've had through April. All of our sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch/listen to them anytime you'd like. At the beginning of April, we looked at water, and then we talked about clean eating. Last week we looked at options beyond meat. And again, this week we're talking about something sweet. So, Annabelle, what was the last sweet thing you had?
It was breakfast.
Breakfast? What'd you have for breakfast?
Well, because as you know, Julian, I eat primarily raw fruit as my diet. So I always start my day with a nice big fruity breakfast. And this morning I had 4 bananas and 4 dates in a smoothie.
Lovely. So, I also had something sweet already today, and this is going to be interesting. I made some discoveries about coffee this morning while I was out for a walk. I went to a grocery store and I wanted to get coffee at the grocery store. And looking at different labels because I was going to get an iced coffee thing. And I found that with the prepackaged Starbucks coffees, the mocha did not have artificial sweetener. All of the others had artificial sweeteners in them.
Interesting.
Yes, I thought that was really interesting. Well, clearly I chose the mocha coffee. But
Right.
yeah, just like little choices like that and just reading labels, it was really a surprising find.
It really is. It's very interesting because that's been a sort of a part of my evolution into this was just starting by learning to read labels because
Yes.
there's so many when we talk about refined sugars, there's just so many different things that can be on the label. Fructose and high fructose corn syrup, evaporated cane juice, white sugar, um, sucrose, invert sugar, corn
Oh my
syrup,
gosh.
dextrose. It just keeps going. So when you start to really learn how to read labels, it's very helpful. And one of the things that I think you do also, because we've shopped together, is when I look at ingredients, the less ingredients, the better.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be the deal. But it's really hard to find foods that are packaged or processed that don't have added sugar to them.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, some foods we expect to have sugar in them, like chocolates, but it doesn't like have to be, um, it can be real sugar. I mean, there's something to be said for having real sugar over artificial sugars. Just like with
Absolutely.
diet sodas. I know
Absolutely.
when it comes to having fewer ingredients, one thing I always talk about chocolate because I've gotten to work on a chocolate plantation. I've gotten to travel to a variety of chocolate plantations in a few different countries and explore some different chocolate manufacturing techniques. But really what I always tell people when because I don't want people to get rid of sweet food. Sweet is like the joy in life. um, I say if you're a chocolate person, you just got to get good quality chocolate. So people that are having like Hershey's or Ghirardelli, people that are having Ghirardelli chocolates and thinking it's really good quality chocolates, that's when I'm like, no, look at the package. It's not really good chocolate. It's better than Hershey's, but it's still not good chocolate. And I say you want to
Right.
find chocolate that has 5 or less ingredients. Now, one of those ingredients might be like nuts, for instance, but really a good
Right.
quality chocolate only needs chocolate, cocoa butter, maybe vanilla, and sugar. That's it. It really only needs 4. You might have some added cocoa butter in there to make it smoother, so that way you might have 5, but really 4 to 5 ingredients is all you need in a chocolate bar, and it's so easy to find them that are like 20 different ingredients.
Yeah, it really is. And, you also can, learning about labels, one of the other things that I find that really helps is some of the independent labels in the sense, especially talking about chocolate, when things are fair trade
Mm-hmm.
or when they're labeled with the certification for
Yep.
the GMO-free verification project. And
But it's
that's
also
kind
important
of
to
a
know what those
nice
labels
find.
mean.
Huh?
It's also important to know what those labels mean because the organic label, for instance, not all organic labels are exactly the same because some organic labels mean it's made with 75% organic ingredients. It does not mean it's 100% organic.
Absolutely. And it's really, when we talk about the sweet part of life, which I agree. I mean, especially since I eat mostly fruit. I think, taking the sweet out of our life is a, a really dangerous thing to get into. So, but when we look at the sugar that's on the market, um, we also have to consider where the source is. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're looking at the label and you see something like high fructose corn syrup, you're likely consuming food that has pesticides in it. And
Yeah.
there's really not a huge debate about what the dangers of eating pesticides can do. So, so I think it's pretty interesting with something sweet how I sort of had to relearn sweetness in the sense like having whole foods and learning how to not add a lot of sugar and find things that sweetens naturally. And eventually my palate started changing.
No, I agree. And I think you and I were talking about this last week, how, one of the first dietary changes that I started to make in my life when I became awake to that need was trying to encourage myself to eat more fruit because I kind of had the stigma in my mind that I could only eat so much fruit because more fruit than that was not good. And if I was having refined sugar, that was fine, but too much fruit was bad. And it took some changing to my own attitude about it to realize, no, it's okay to have more fruit, because that means you need less refined sugar. I mean, fruit can be expensive. That's the one downside, but
Right.
really having the fruit is really, I think, the a great way to change the taste buds to wanting more natural sugars rather than refined and processed sugars.
It really is. And, I was reading a book last night and it was talking about an oasis in the desert and all the date trees. And,
Mm.
as I continue learning my relationship and how it coincides with nature, I start to look at these amazing plants, like when we talked about herbs and weeds, that grow in these very arid and challenging conditions, like the middle of a desert. And so, not only have I been able to change my palate to get away from refined sugar, but I've been able to add things like I have dates every day because I just am amazed that there's just such an immense amount of medicinal value of reducing inflammation and strengthening bones and boosting energy and just by having dates. So it used to be that I felt the very same way, or I thought the very same way as what you're talking about. And then I really struggled getting off of sugar because it was very addictive. And I would like feel guilty, about like what I had eaten, or what have you.
Mhm.
And of course, I would have physical symptoms. But now, I don't feel guilty at all. I mean, I feel like I'm actually giving myself something wonderful and healthy, but it's so sweet and wonderfully delicious too.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things that my taste buds have changed over time. I mean, I definitely still have refined sugars. That's not something I am shy about saying because I definitely still do. But more and more, I find fruits that I never thought were sweet to be sweet. And there's many times where I even have breads and meats and realize how sweet they are because it's a different kind of sweetness. It's more of a
Yeah.
it's savory sweetness and fulfilling to the body in a different way.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because when we talk about sweeteners, uh, it's it's not just sugar and things like that. We're also talking about refined starches and
Yes.
breads and condiments, that
Mm,
often have added sugar to them of some kind, whether it's, cane sugar or what have you. And so if you have a diet that's highly based with processed foods, I think you're going to end up having a lot of sugar, and you're going to get the kind of sugar that doesn't break down in the body very easily, like those refined starches.
You just said an interesting thing that I often forget about myself is condiments and how sweet they are. And I think of kind of condiments kind of fall into maybe three different categories. Ones that are sweet, such as ketchup. Ones that are salty and spicy, maybe say like mustard. And then ones that are more fatty, like salad dressings, mayonnaise, and things like that.
Yeah.
And there are three very different kinds of, um, let's say, three different ways to satisfy the body by adding something to the meal. And it's very easy to forget that we can add those same kinds of things into our cooking. For instance, I guess it might be kind of challenging. If you think of like a classic like chicken nuggets that someone might put like ketchup on, but if you
Yeah.
are baking a chicken and you put like apple or pear slices onto it when you then go to eat it, that's a different kind of sweetness that you're adding into the food. I mean, same kind of thing. If you add mustard, it's very easy to add some spices and additional salt to them. Um, or if you're looking for more of a fatty addition, like roasting a whole chicken, because then the fatty components are still there and then you get a more moist chicken. It's very easy to change your cooking to compensate for not using condiments.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty interesting because there seems to be, so many things available. And once I really started getting away from sugar, that was a big area for me was condiments. But,
Yep.
we have such a vast market too these days. I've been able to find ketchup that doesn't have any sweetener in it, that's organic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not expensive. It's only $2.99 a bottle.
Wow.
And so that was the other thing that I struggled when I was doing a lot of condiments was trying to get things that were organic or had a little more quality ingredients in them were much more expensive. But like you said, you start to learn that you can do some of this in your cooking. And now I love to add things like pears, apples, honey, coconut sugar, or coconut nectar. I love coconut nectar because it's like a syrup, you
Mm.
know. So there's, yeah, and even dates. I put dates into my tomato sauce, like when I make my own homemade ragu.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely makes a difference. And then again, I'm back to that. I'm still satisfying my palate, but I'm not compromising my health.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what different kinds of sweeteners we do use. So you've talked a bit about dates. I know you also use maple syrup and honey frequently. Um, are you still using both of those?
Yes.
Um, so I know when we were talking yesterday, we were saying that interestingly, it's easy to forget that there are sweeteners that have medicinal benefits.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. I mean, honey is the best example in my mind,
mhm.
that just to even out the body and manage. It's interesting because I found that my blood sugar issues were much better managed whenever I started consuming honey and stopped consuming sugar.
That's easy to do. Why don't we all do that more?
Well, and the seasonal allergies, like I know you're familiar with this, especially getting some good, clean, local honey can help you build up an immunity to your direct environment.
Yeah, and it's really hard to find local honey. The concept behind that is the pollens that are local to you are used by the bees to make the honey. So it's already been processed and it kind of when you then eat the honey, your body gets used to the pollens in that way, and then you don't react to them the same way. But you really need really local honey. I mean, like, we live in Maryland, and Pennsylvania honey is just not going to cut it. Usually you really need to get honey that's even in the same valley you are in, for instance, if you're living in a valley. Um, or like your side of the river kind of thing. Like, think geographic isolation of insects, and plants and wind movement. You need to stay within the same area, and that can be very hard to get. And honey is also very expensive. And
Right.
really, buying honey in bulk at the beginning of a season, or really maybe at the end of the season, so you take it all winter long and then have it already in your system for the spring. Um, Buying honey in bulk saves a lot of money. It might be really expensive at first. I think the last time that I bought a gallon of honey, I want to say it was around $100. Um, but local organic honey for $100 for a gallon, that's a really good price.
It
Um,
is, and it's really important to pay attention to that, as you know. I mean, you want to make sure you've got raw honey,
yep.
you want to make sure that it's free of additives. You want to make sure that it's local, and you want to make sure of the area that someone is harvesting from, because bees pollinate in a certain mile radius.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're surrounded by big agriculture that uses a lot of heavy chemical, pesticides and herbicides, you're still going to get remnants of that in the honey.
Yep.
So I have a very hard time finding local honey, and there's only a few good brands on the market that are supposed to be very low in glyphosate. Do you know what they are?
I don't. It's not something I have looked for.
It's so Heavenly. I think it's Heavenly, but the and I just ran out of it too.
And these are local
Um,
to us in our area, Annabelle?
no, that's what I mean is, it's been very hard for me to find good local honey. So there's a couple of brands that I've turned to that I've had to get online. And there's one particular brand right now that has gone through glyphosate testing, and it's one of the few on the market that is glyphosate free.
Okay.
So I was reading about it in the Mother Earth News publication. So if I can
They're a
come up with
great
a
place
name,
to find that information.
yeah, that's a really good resource. So, honey is one sweetener, but even though I do love it for its medicinal value, I try to not use too much of it. One, too much is too much, and two, it's so hard to find and expensive.
Yeah, I personally prefer the taste of maple syrup a lot better. And I think it's a little bit more sustainable, especially with all the concerns around taking honey from bees these days.
Right, I agree. Well, when
Um,
it comes to maple syrup, do you know if all maple syrup is cooked, or is there any raw maple syrup?
I believe all maple syrup has to be cooked, primarily because of the harvesting techniques.
Yeah, that's what I was
Um,
thinking.
because I mean, some piping for maple syrup will travel a few miles of piping, and there's no real good sanitation method through that piping. So it doesn't really happen until it gets to the collection station. And also, cooking has to happen because the sap, the what's right out of the tree, is very liquidy. It's not anything near what we actually use.
Mm,
Um,
right. Yeah, I was interested about that. Thank you.
yeah. Think of like I know you and I have been working with comfrey lately. You think of like if you make a comfrey tea, it's like not super thick, but if you make a comfrey decoction or a comfrey infused oil, it's thicker.
Right.
So it's that same kind of thing is happening, is that the plant sugars are kind of condensing. Um, that's really what's happening there.
Yeah. Well, and the flavor of maple syrup is just, I don't know. I love maple syrup.
Um, Now another sweetener that's a lot of people turn to it as a healthy alternative sweetener that's easy to access, that's inexpensive, and doesn't tend to have pesticides or herbicides or anything like that, is palm sugar.
Oh, palm sugar is an interesting one.
Yep. I
So what do you
personally,
think about the sustainability?
it's not sustainable. It's just like straight up
Yeah.
not sustainable. I don't use it because of the sustainability issues. And I'm really surprised that manufacturing with palm sugar has continued at all. I feel it's pretty I pretty much feel it's continued only because people wanting palm oil. Because I think people who want palm sugar are a little bit more conscious of the fact that we're killing the orangutans' habitats to get the palm sugar. But I think palm oil is a lot more, the people who use palm oil might not be as conscious of this issue. Um, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. So I don't think it's definitely not something that I knew about for a long time, the sustainability issues with palm sugar or, palm oil. So, but again, it's a wonderful sweetener. I love the oil whenever I do use oil sometimes,
Hmm.
but it's another thing that just kind of like honey, that I keep to a minimum.
Yeah.
So, have you ever used coconut nectar before?
I haven't used coconut nectar, but I have used coconut sugar.
Oh yeah. Well, I love both of them.
I really don't know the comparison between coconut sugar and coconut nectar. My general assumption is that the sugar is a dehydrated form of the nectar.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
and it's delicious, the liquid form of it.
yeah.
I really
Um,
love adding it into my Asian cooking.
yeah, but it has the slightly coconutty taste to it still.
Yeah.
Um, I really use, when I'm using granular sugar, I do use cane sugar. Um, I got to see once how cane sugar was made, and I was like, well, this is a really easy process. I think sugar cane is really a sustainable crop because it grows so quickly and can grow so close together. Um, the only like real issue is if you're getting it processed in the really supernatural way, which is ridiculously easy, or if you're getting it from a place that's getting it chemically manufactured through different kinds of extraction techniques that I just am not familiar with. And one of the things that I didn't know when I was learning about how cane sugar was made is where molasses comes from.
Right. Right, I agree.
So molasses is really the byproduct of the sugar making process. It's the liquid components that will never become solids. And where I was, the farm I was on when I got to see the um, cane sugar being made, they would feed the molasses to the pigs.
Oh,
Um, and I thought that was a great option. It was a really sustainable process what they had there. So basically, they they had a lovely mule who would carry in the sugar cane on his back, and then and then they would take the sugar cane and it would go through a press. If you've ever had fresh sugarcane juice or ever seen that, it's a very simple press that they just run the sugar cane right through. And the juice comes out. Then the juice goes and gets boiled. The cane that is left goes to dry for a few days. And then in a few days' time, that dried cane will be used to fuel the fire to boil the juice from the sugar cane.
Mm.
So already you're using all of the plant. And then as it boils, the let's say the foam that's on top, basically that's the molasses, is taken out, and then over the course of a few days it's boiled down enough that it's then laid out to dry in the sun to actually crystallize and form the cane sugar. And it's like every piece of the process is just extremely sustainable within the small family farm that I was able to see this at, and they're able to export that just locally or internationally as well where I was. And I thought it was a really great process. And they were really able to keep it up, and it was really, um, it really had no excess. There was no waste. Everything was
Right.
used, and everyone made money, and no animals were harmed. Extra animals got fed, and I mean, like, so many good things about the process. But there's really, unless you like go to a sugarcane farm, you're never going to really know if that's how they all are.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
that's so true. But I think that's great that, you know, cane sugar or, cane sugar can be used as a sustainable crop.
yeah.
But it's almost like something else that people use for sweeteners that I think about, which is stevia. So I had this experience on a farm where I grew stevia,
Mm.
and I had stevia before that, and it was always white. And when I grew
Okay.
it was definitely not white.
What was
So
what
I
was the harvesting technique for it? So stevia is a plant. It's a leafy green plant. Um, how is it then processed into something that's usable?
I just dry the herbs and grind it up
Okay.
into a powder, or dry the leaves and then grind them up and use it as a powder, or make it into a syrup with the powder. But that really opened my eyes to that sometimes the actual food or plant is not bad itself. It's how that is processed.
Yeah, there are definitely different ways to process stevia. I My assumption, without actually knowing, is that the granular stevia that we see in like a store is probably a decoction of the leaves that is then the leaf portion is then removed, and the decoction that is left is then probably dehydrated.
Right,
So it's really an extract of stevia would be the way to think about it rather than the actual plant matter.
right,
Um, but I really don't know for sure if that's how it's made. Um, I really think there's easy and good ways to use stevia leaves fresh, and I think it can be a great method. Um, but again, it's really possible that there's a lot of um, processing that goes into getting that granular stevia,
right.
and I just don't know what that is.
Yeah, me either. I just was really interested, and it really turned me off to getting stevia in the store because I didn't want something that had been dyed or bleached or,
Hmm.
and I find that a lot with cane sugar.
Yeah, I think it's easy to find cane sugar that hasn't been bleached. Cane sugar that hasn't been bleached is going to be slightly brown.
Right.
And if you think about if you've ever made caramel, which is basically just burning sugar, it's that cooking process, that heating process to evaporate the water that's going to turn it slightly brown. So that's where that kind of brownness comes from. It's also some minerals and things like that that are in there, but I think it's a lot from the processing. Because anything that is pure white is going to have to be bleached or completely chemically manufactured in the first place.
Absolutely.
So when
So
it
that
comes
goes
to
in.
this,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say when it comes to the stevia, it's possible if they let's assume that there is some kind of decoction method being made, there might be an additional chemical extraction process to remove the impurities, so to say, before making it into that white powder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, that calls into how difficult it is to kind of be self-sustainable,
Yep.
and how we've really become reliant on our food, being processed for it. Because, I mean, I have so much to learn, and I don't even eat processed food much, certainly not to the level that I used to. But, when I have coconut nectar, that's essentially processed food.
Mm-hmm.
It's been taken for me and someone's done everything. And I think, just like kind of reading labels, like really starting to understand how food is processed, could help to make someone more sustainable. But there's the difficulty with, time. People are busy, they're working,
Yep.
they've got families. Trying to figure out how to do this and grow your own stuff and process your own food is.
And finding that information on how to do all of that is just even harder.
Yeah, and then getting the equipment, that you need. Mm-hmm. So I think just kind of helping along our processing systems of food, which we can do by insisting with the money that we spend that we're given, good quality ingredients.
Yep.
But
you get to vote with your paycheck.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really amazing. I see that really manifesting in the market now because the other day I was looking at some salad dressings and I saw a couple of new brands. Mm-hmm. And they're very specific to people that don't want to have simple sugars or don't want to have a lot of sweeteners and a lot of additives and things like that. And so the marketing is starting to shift toward more people becoming conscientious of the food that they're eating.
I have also recently noticed a shift in salad dressings at the market both you and I shop at. I also noticed that they've definitely moved away from preservatives and sweeteners in their salad dressings that are available. And they have gotten rid of a number of brands. And I think that's because consumers at that store were not buying them. So it goes back to that same, you vote with your paycheck. I mean, if you keep buying something, then the store is going to keep having it. And this is an interesting idea because for those of us that usually don't shop at conventional grocery stores, it's important to sometimes do that because if we go into the conventional grocery stores and buy the organic options, buy the same brands that we normally do that they don't sell a lot of, it's going to mean that that conventional grocery store is going to have more of those brands and more of those kinds of products available for the average consumer who doesn't shop in an organic grocery store or a co-op.
Yeah, which is true. I mean, I've been seeing that, every once in a while I go into some more chain type grocery stores and they're starting to have sections that are organic and gluten-free and things of that nature. So I think there's definitely a shift, and I mean, getting to the sugar thing, I think it's really starting, where people are starting to pay attention to what they're eating. And you said something at the beginning of this that really hit home for me.
Mm-hmm.
Was, whenever I first started bringing more fruit into my life, I had that same mentality, and I would say, oh, well, that contains too much sugar. And then I would look at what I was eating, and I was like, well, actually, this, processed item that I'm eating, if I'm really paying attention, has more sugar in it than eating that, fruit smoothie does.
Yep.
So it's very interesting to me, the impact that has had in my life specifically. And I know, that it's been the same for you. And you've been cutting down your sugar intake. And do you find that it helps you with mental clarity, or with being able to have calmer thoughts? Do you feel that?
So I am a person that tends to get cravings very frequently around my menstrual cycle. So the last 2 weeks has been nothing but sugar in my life. And I think I have a number of shifts that happen all at once around my menstrual cycle, is that I all of a sudden tend to have a week of very low blood pressure and very high cravings. Now, I don't always crave sugar, which is interesting. At different months, I definitely crave different things.
Right.
But a lot of times because I always tend to have low blood pressure, that means the first things I start to reach for are sweet drinks.
Right.
So one thing I've been debating on lately, and I've talked to you about, is that if I'm actually having some mineral deficiency, and this is what's leading me to want more sweet things, and if this is why I like to have the mineral water versus regular water, and a few other things. But I think there's a lot of things that play into that, and I think for me, my blood pressure changes tend to play a significant higher role in my mental clarity around sugars now. But I would say maybe about 2, 3 years ago or something, I think because I would crave sugars so much during my menstrual cycle, and then I would have the sugars, that then I would have more mood swings, so to say. So I don't have as many mood swings right now around my menstrual cycle, but I really think a lot of the mood swings I was having was really because of the sugar.
Right.
And because sugar, just like caffeine, very similarly, and we often put them together, either with tea or coffee, or even chocolate has some caffeine in it. They both cause a quick up and then a quick down. And so if you're menstruating and your hormones are already doing that same thing, sugar and caffeine are not going to help the situation at all. And I have definitely had times where I've had a lot of sugar, and I've had very strong emotional reactions to individuals around me for no good reason, other than I didn't feel I was in control of my own emotions because of my energy levels being all over the place. I think that there are definitely some months that I crave fats more than I crave sugars or salts, for instance. And I find that my energy levels are more stable those months, because I do a fair job of getting good quality fats when I'm craving fatty foods. I will get a little bit of extra flax oil, and that will all help my brain function a little bit more. But really, those sugar cravings can cause my emotions to go all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely noticed an emotional, or, whenever I started experimenting going off of sugar, I started noticing that it really impacted my mood very, very greatly. I had a very difficult time. So I, of course, as you know, being a pharmaceutical injury survivor, spending years on antidepressants and, anxiety medications, it was really necessary for me to get rid of refined sugar. And I think that that might be something that's playing into some people's issues that they might not even be
Of
considering.
course. Yeah, and it's unfortunate for individuals that have anxiety, depression, mood swings, anything along those lines.
Billion. Well, I don't know if someone can hear me or not, but I lost hearing Jillian. So I'm just going to stand by and wait to see if she comes back online. I know she was just getting into something really good, too. She just said that she lost connection. So I think she will be back on in a moment. I don't even know what she was going into, but it was definitely good stuff. And we were talking about how sugar can play into some issues with people's health that they might not realize. I'm just going to stand by here, and I guess, all this talk about something sweet is making me a little bit hungry, even though I had a nice big breakfast. So, yeah. Well, I suppose one thing I can do is talk about the cookies I'm going to make. So I'm making some cookies. Well, they don't have any eggs or oil in them. And I'm making them with bananas, coconut sugar, vanilla, gluten-free flour, and salt. And sometimes I put chocolate chips in there. And this is an amazing recipe that I've tried lots of different cookie recipes, and this one tends to be one of the favorites that I've made. So definitely it's pretty easy after a little bit of exploring to learn how to cook without sugar. So although I do sometimes make an alternative, see.
Hi, Annabelle.
Oh, there she is. I was just filling up the airspace with my upcoming cookie plans.
Lovely. So was I. It'll be really interesting to see which recorded because on my end it said it was still recording. So it'll be interesting to see if it kept recording me or if it kept recording you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see. We can check on that later. That'll be something interesting to find out. So what was your cookie recipe, real quick?
Oh, I was saying I was making them with bananas, coconut sugar, vanilla, and gluten-free flour and salt.
I still remember those sweet potato cookies you made last year.
Yeah, I was
Or was
actually
that?
just looking over at my book, thinking I probably have that recipe written down.
Oh,
Sometimes I just go crazy and I just start making things, and whatever turns out is what turns out.
I understand. I do the same exact thing. That's why I try to always take pictures, and I think I suggested take pictures of all your ingredients. So at least if you don't, and the finished product. So even if you don't remember what you did, you can at least have a starting point.
It's a really good suggestion. I need to start doing that because it's, I always say, oh, I'll remember that, but I don't.
Sometimes we even forget what we made in the first place.
I know. So what you were about to say something that sounded phenomenal. That's what I was saying was I know she's about to go into something really great.
So I'm not quite sure where I cut out. What I was speaking about was basically the unfortunate nature of a lot of psychologists who support individuals with a variety of psychological challenges, such as anxiety, depression, or I mean, those are standard, but many more challenges in that they're just not trained in nutrition. And that connection, while there's a lot of research out there, it's known about the connection between basically what we eat and our moods. It's not something that's integrated into any it's not something most psychiatrists use and utilize.
Right.
But that's why we kind of all stick together. We learn from the people around us, and that I think a lot of herbalists and nutritionists are aware of these things. So when someone is made aware that those could be possibilities, there's a lot of individuals out there that can offer some support.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you really got to find some good support whenever you're going through trying to learn some modifications with diet. And you talked about the Herbies group. That's another area. There's a lot of online support groups. Sugar, in particular, for me, was one of the most difficult foods that I phased out, just because I found it, at least for me personally, and it seems to be this way for other people, to be very addictive. And what I found in my case was that when I had a lot of sugar cravings, which I don't really have much of now that I've come off of processed food for a while, but what it was related to for me was fungal issues.
Yes, I do hear that a lot. And in particular, I think of individuals who have yeast infections and them needing to basically reduce their sugar because that's basically what's feeding the overgrowth of yeast. I think that's something that shows up a lot. So if you are experiencing fungal infections, it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it really is. But again, you run into a whole lot of the talk that if you have fungal issues, you have to avoid fruit. And that was where my confusion came in. So I really struggled, like you were talking about, with trying to reevaluate my relationship with fruit and understand that, it was really the refined stuff, the complex stuff that was getting me, and not just with sugar, but again, with those refined starches.
I think what I would choose to do if I had a yeast infection or other kind of fungal infection and I was told to stop having fruit in addition to all other sweeteners, I think I would choose to do that while I had an active infection and then bring fruit back into my diet and work on keeping the refined sugars out.
Right.
Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you start doing it, like we were saying, your palate changes. I had something that was really actually very sweet. I can't recall what it was, but I remember that it was too sweet for me then. Because I'd been away from refined sugar for so long. It was actually coconut sugar because I haven't personally used it very much. I've just kind of done the, maple syrup and stuff like that. And I was really like, whoa, I used to like sweeten things a little bit extra, just like I used to salt things a little bit extra.
Oh, we still salt things a little bit extra.
Yeah, right.
Just for better salt now.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely interesting. I spent a long time on the very standard American diet, very, very heavy in processed sugar, um, you know, and not clean, you know, sustainably sources of it. And I definitely, in my personal experience, had many years of suffering physically and mentally whenever those were the types of choices that I made.
So, we haven't talked a lot about that. I'd like us to touch on, even though clearly both of us are not for artificial sweeteners. Um, what are your personal thoughts on an individual using artificial sweeteners to reduce their own usage of processed sweeteners? I mean, artificial sweeteners are still processed, but like, what are your thoughts on for the average individual using artificial sweeteners?
Okay, so my honest opinion is that you should eat, someone, I would prefer to eat sugar versus um, sweeteners, artificial sweeteners. I think artificial sweeteners are just completely toxic.
I completely agree.
I mean, and this is from someone, I mean, I used to love diet sodas. I did a lot of, because my family has a lot of history of diabetes.
Mm.
So I did a lot of, you know, like I was trying to be preventative. And I was like, well, you know, this kind of runs in my family. I need to be careful. So instead of regular soda, I need to get diet soda. But whoa, I had no idea the
Yeah.
dangers of that. So what do you think?
So interestingly, for this conversation, I'm going to talk about this a little bit because I include stevia as an artificial sweetener. Whether you're using the plant leaf, as we were talking about before, or the white powdered equivalent. And the reason for that is because neither of them are actual sugar. When our body takes in sugar, we use it for energy. That's what sugar does in our body. But
Right,
if we get the taste of sugar, but not the energy of sugar, our body says, whoops, we need more. So you crave sugar even more. And stevia does this exact same thing. And this is the problem with diet sodas. The concept of having a diet soda, I mean, diet sodas are really marketed heavily because the industry knows that if you have a diet soda, your body is still going to be craving the sugar because your taste buds are going to say sugar, but the rest of your body and all of the cells of your body are not going to get the sugar they need. So
right.
your brain is then going to say, I need more sugar. So you go for more diet soda. And it's just an
Absolutely.
ongoing process. And there's nothing fulfilling and satisfying to the body of having a diet soda. So I completely say if you're going to have soda or if you're going to have something, just go for the real sugar version because at least your body will get some level of satisfaction from it rather than just encouraging your craving and give you worse cravings for what you've already tried to compensate for but haven't really compensated for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, those artificial sweeteners, it actually was interesting because I really developed a taste for them,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really something that was another sort of like addictive deal for me. You know, like I had to go to sugar to get off of artificial sweeteners, or you know, we weren't talking about doing it the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So I think
um,
you and I can agree probably our favorite sweeteners are honey and maple syrup. Would you say those are our two favorites?
yeah, I would say I would have to go with
Okay.
dates and honey and maple syrup. But
Okay.
I have to honestly say that dates are my favorite.
Okay. Well, Annabelle, what's a good recipe with dates that people can try out?
Oh my gosh, what's a good recipe to date?
Something simple.
Ooh, oh, I know. So, nice cream.
Yeah.
Maybe some banana coconut milk with date nice cream.
So how does someone
Which,
do that?
so get your bananas, how many ever you like. I like lots of them, and I just chop them up into small slices, and I put them in the freezer for a couple of hours. I don't let them get all the way frozen,
Mhm.
but you can. And I soak my dates, and then what I do is I reserve my date water for my smoothies or to drink or whatever because it's just got so much wonderfulness in it.
Mhm.
And I put my bananas in, and then I get my homemade coconut milk, and I put an amount of that in that will give it a nice thick consistency.
Mhm.
And then I blend it up, put it in a bowl, and just enjoy it like good old ice cream.
That sounds delicious. So my favorite of our sweeteners that we talked about is maple syrup. And I know I've shared my recipe with you. It's very simple, just like yours is very simple. But I really love lemonade made with maple syrup. There's
Mmm.
something about the density of the maple syrup that really is satisfying when mixed with the sour and the strong mineral flavor of lemon. So
Oh.
I find it to be a very satisfying flavor combination, especially this time of year when it's starting to get warmer. We want to be outside more, and it's not like filled with that sweet rush. Instead, with the maple syrup, it's kind of it's satisfying and dense in flavor. So I'll use about I think I do about a 1 to 4 ratio. So like maybe like 1 tablespoon of maple syrup. No, 1 tablespoon of maple syrup to like 3 tablespoons of lemon juice.
Okay.
And then I will put a little bit of water into that and a lot of ice and shake it because it's really hard to get that maple syrup to mix in. So the ice is really helpful to like mix it together. So I'll put this into like a ball jar kind of thing. And then I'll fill the rest of it with water. And one thing I'll sometimes do is I'll actually put significantly more lemon juice in, and I'll drink some of it, and then I'll add more water, and then I'll drink some of it and add more water. That
Hmm.
way, throughout the day, I'm getting less and less of the sugar as well, and less of the lemon. But I still get that same satisfaction. And I really like that because it keeps my energy at like a consistent level throughout the day because I get I get more sweetener and I get more stimulation from the sourness of the lemon juice in the morning. And then throughout the day, I get slightly less, but it still continues. So I think it's a nice method of keeping me going.
Ooh, I love that. I've not tried it with maple syrup. I need to do that because I usually have tried it with honey.
Yeah.
So I love that suggestion, and
I
I'm going to
think the
get on.
honey is really sweet with lemon. I really like the density and the heaviness of the maple syrup instead, the real rich mineral content.
Mm. Which is
Um,
great. That's a wonderful way to make a natural electrolyte drink.
exactly. That's exactly what it is. Um,
Well,
exactly what it is.
especially I think, as the weather gets warmer and we start to get more into the season of, sweating and it being, you know, getting a lot more issues with dehydration,
Hmm.
that's a wonderful, wonderful way that you can make a nice big batch of that and take it throughout the day. And I love starting my days with lemon or with something that's really nice and astringent to kind of clean up stuff from the night before.
Great. A great plan. Everybody should do it. But Annabelle, we have come to the end of our time today. Thank you everyone for joining us again next week. What are we doing next week? Next week, we are going to be talking about breathing.
Ooh, good.
So many different ways to breathe, and the average person doesn't know there are so many different ways to breathe. So we're going to talk about a few. But if you are enjoying Wellness Watch, be sure to come over to our Patreon page to support us. You get early access to blogs and bonus content every month with your subscription. And this month, the bonus content is all on foam rolling. So if you want some additional movement techniques, kind of like personal massage kind of techniques, it's a super cool process. So you can find more of that at Patreon. But it is our patrons that help support Wellness Watch to keep it going every week. Um, and again, if you do have any questions, be sure to stop by the Dancing Herbalist Herbies to ask us there. And all of these sessions are recorded, even if we had a little hiccup as we did today. They are all recorded, so you can check out our other sessions as well. And I look forward to speaking with everyone next week. Have a good week. Bye,
Thanks
Annabelle.
so much, Jillian. Bye.